All right, people are coming in. I'm going to start basically a roll call for our members. And so I'm going to type these into a list as I go. As people are coming in, I see Jeff Roberts from Colorado. I see Brian Black from Hawaii. And by the way, I do encourage, if you can, to put your video on. I think if we can replicate a real in-person members meeting as best we can, it's awesome. I understand if, you know, if you're not, if, you know, appropriate for a PG audience right now, but or eating something or whatever. But let's see, we got Colleen Murphy from Connecticut. Thank you. See you, Colleen. We got Patrick Fowle from Nevada. Welcome, Patrick. We have Amy from Kentucky, right? Benson Haber. We have Deborah Fisher from Tennessee. Who else do we have? I'm looking at the grid. Chime in the chat if you are a member coalition, your name and coalition. Because I think
Michelle from the New York Coalition.
Great. Is that the New York Coalition for Open Government? Okay, just want to make sure. I think New York.
Yes, we are.
Okay, because New York, you have what? Reinvent Albany, sort of. And
Yes, we collaborate with Reinvent Albany sometimes on things.
nice. And okay. Am I missing another state? So I have Jeff Roberts, Colorado. Oh, sorry, Jim.
Yeah, in Maine.
Jim from Maine. And it's funny, NFOIC, you know, should be on here too. Kind of representing the Northeast as well. I love that we have multiple groups covering things. Okay, so Jeff Roberts, Colorado, Brian Black, Hawaii, Colleen Murphy, Connecticut, Patrick Fowle, Nevada, Amy Benson Haber, Kentucky, Deborah Fisher, Tennessee, Michelle from New York, Jim from Maine, and am I missing anybody? We of course have Megan from Virginia. I guess I'll represent Arizona so we can have a quorum. I am on the board, although we have kind of been on a hiatus. Pandemic. Anyone else that should be noted here as a member coalition? We want to make sure everybody's who's here is represented.
I guess I can represent Florida. I don't know, since I'm with both of them. But
Okay, we'll have Erica representing Florida. Both of the groups, FAF and Barbers.
oh, so
Okay. And anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody. Okay, well, let's get started, shall we? Thanks for coming today, this members meeting. Again, suggest if you can have your video on. It's great to see faces, shiny faces. And if you have comments or questions as we go, feel free to put them in the chat. The Zoom chat. I'll be watching that as we go and try to address this as we go. I'll call this meeting to order. And first, what I'll do is I'll put in the chat a report that can I be a co-host, Megan, please? That would be awesome if that's possible. So I could put documents in the chat. I was going to put my president's report in there. And and summarize a few things. Basically, the state of the organization of NFOIC. One thing, we've had a successful transition. Yet again, we have a soft landing and a successful landing, moving from the University of Florida to Virginia Coalition for Open Government. This was predicated on losing grant funding, essentially. This is happening around the country. Open the Government has transitioned into POGO. So, we're still doing what we're doing. It's just, unfortunately, we don't have the staff we used to. So Todd Fettig and Erica Benton did an amazing job, and we really appreciative of them. And we hated that grant funding ran out, but we were able to enlist them to help with the summit, and I'm sure in the future as well. In the meantime, what we're doing is we're paying Virginia Coalition $10,000 a year to manage the back office, administrative stuff. And Megan Ryan here has done an outstanding job, just phenomenal. So things are going along great, and I'm quite happy with the transition. We're basically back to where NFOIC was at the beginning, where it was housed within the Texas Coalition for Open Government, Texas Foundation for, I always forget the
Freedom of
Texas.
Information Foundation of Texas,
There you go. There you go.
FOIFT.
Thank you, Megan. Essentially kind of where we're back to with that, and that's fine, because our mission is to help the coalitions network and collaborate and learn from one another. That's really why we're on this planet, and we're going to continue to do that. We've had a variety of accomplishments. Yeah, I guess I can't share my document in the chat. So
You should be able to do it through Zoom.
you mean share the screen? Yeah.
Yes, and share documents.
Usually you can share it in this chat, but it's
I
not-
mean, all the permissions.
well,
you
anyway,
should be
that's
able
okay.
to.
I sent this around on the membership listserv already, so everybody
I
should
can
have
put
a
them
copy.
in there for you.
I'm sorry, what, Erica?
I can drop them in there for you guys.
Okay, thanks. That president's report, do you have that file, Erica?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So it's just a summary. We continue to have accomplishments. The FOI Boot Camp for Journalists of Color, funded by the Society of Professional Journalists Foundation, second year. It's great to bring in and empower new voices in our cause. The Knight Litigation Fund continues to help folks sue for records. In the past 12 months, we've had 4 cases funded in Florida, California, Colorado. We had that survey of coalition members that we did and we released during Sunshine Week. And I think that's a useful thing that we can do as an organization and gathering data and giving context to what everybody's doing around the country. And I put a link to the chat for our results of that. We continue to fund Bill Track 50, which I hope is helpful to some of the coalitions. It's free to member coalitions. We pay, I think, $3,000, Erica, something like that, Megan.
Roughly.
3,000, something like that a year, so that all the coalitions have free access to the upper end of its capabilities. And so hopefully that'll be helpful in tracking legislation in your states. I understand that some people who are really on top of it don't need it. They have their own methods for keeping tabs, but hopefully that's useful. So things are coming along pretty good, and we'll continue to do so. Our budget, just update on that, is good. We've come in on budget for the last fiscal year, and it's definitely simpler now without grants, and so that's been helpful. And I don't know, Erica, do you have a copy of that you could plunk in the chat? I can email that.
The SBJ grant.
I'm sorry, what?
What grant?
The budget.
The budget here.
Oh yeah.
I'll
I got it.
email both of these to you, And if you could plunk both of those files in the chat, that would be great.
Gotcha.
And so, if anybody has questions on the budget, essentially moving forward, our annual budget will be about $50,000 a year. Pretty bare bones, pretty simple. 10,000 of that going to VCOG, a chunk of that going to coordinating this conference. In the case of this conference, it's a $19,000 contract to make it happen. We have generous sponsors. Bloomberg continues to give us $30,000 a year toward this summit. Thank you, Bloomberg. And Todd and Erica have gotten new sponsors this year, which are great. New York Times, the Knight Foundation's back with some sponsorships. So I think we have a possibility of developing more sponsorship next year to rebuild and grow as we want. So that's great. And then finally, I'd like to mention that we have a new coalition. The board on Monday just accepted the Alabama Sunlight Coalition as a new member, which is going to be coordinated by Jobs to Move America. They have a staffer in Alabama who is full-time and paid and has been coordinating various groups there toward transparency issues. In this group, and I'll put the link into their website, you could see their website and what they're about. So we're happy to have them join. Alabama gets a bad rap when it comes to transparency. The data indicates it's not so good there. I'm told they're also thinking of starting a coalition in Mississippi, which could be really good for Mississippi. All right. Now, Megan, I thought I'd give you a few minutes or to introduce yourself, at least if people haven't met you, since folks will be seeing you a lot if they haven't already.
Sure. Hi, Megan Ryan with the Virginia Coalition for Open Government. I've been on the NFOIC board for about 10 years at least, and my predecessor was one of the founding board members back in the mid 90s. So NFOIC's been in the VCOG wheelhouse for years. And so I'm really glad that we were able to step in and take over some of these functions as the money started to wind down after the grants were pulled. Valiant efforts on all sides over the years of trying to get grant funding and do the things that the grant funders wanted. It just didn't work out as a long-term solution. So, but what I'm trying to do is just is doing the administrative stuff, paying the bills, answering the phones, those kinds of things. But what I really want to do the most is to really engage with my fellow coalition leaders. And so you probably get tired of my messages and my, what do you want to do about this? And what do you think about that? But it really, really helps. And it's really the purpose of NFOIC is to keep us networked and talking to each other. So I really am relying on you all to engage back and to put things out there yourself as well. Taking the initiative like Georgia has done and Tennessee have done on these letters to the Uniform Law Commission. Those have been really good. And so anyway, it's just my plug. Let's just keep talking. Let's keep talking. Show up for those monthly meetings, post to the group chat, the Google group, share each other's material on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And let us know how things are going with you.
Thank you, Megan. So again, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll monitor that. Next on the agenda, we're going to talk about officers. And then after that, the summit, this current summit and next year's summit, and open the floor then to feedback and questions and discussion on some of these matters. So first, the matter of business that the members have to take every year is renewal or election of officers. It's the board or the members that decide who's on the board. And so we don't decide. So we have 3 officers whose 3-year terms are up, and they would be great with renewal. I'm going to propose that we renew them for another term. They've been great. One is Jeff Roberts from Colorado. The other, I'm sorry, not Jeff. That's coming up next, Jeff. Mark Horvit from the University of Missouri, Michael Morrissey from Muckrock, and Terry Muchler from Pennsylvania. So those are 3 board members who would like to renew. This will bring our board to 10 members total. And we, Tom Verdon, his term ended. He's going to slide off, and then Megan exited the board. She was on the board and now is an ex officio member working as the administrator of VCOG. So we're now down to 10 board members if we renew these 3, which I think is great. In fact, if we can even get it down a little lower, I think smaller boards can be more effective. It's like 7. The minimum we need by bylaws is 7, I believe. So anyway, I would propose we renew Mark Horvit, Michael Morrissey, and Terry Muchler. I will make that a motion.
I will second.
Thank you, Jim. Any comments or feedback? Discussion? I do not see that. Okay. All right. So all those in favor, and you're the members that, and I see Patricia Todd joined us from the new Alabama member. Patricia, welcome. Feel free to raise your virtual hand or your real hand if you vote yes. Seven, 8, 9. So I see a majority. Anybody vote no? Michael Morrissey, you're not voting no? Okay. So thank you, Michael, and Terry and Mark Horvit for continuing very active, important members for this group. And so thank you. And thanks to Tom Verdon from the Associated Press, who served great for these 3 years. I would like to mention the board did elect new officers Monday, and these will be the officers moving forward. Secretary will be Grace Chang. Some of you may have seen Grace in some earlier panels for our summit. She's outstanding and been a board member for some time. Treasurer, Deborah Fisher. So Deborah, thank you for stepping up. Deborah is amazing. And then for Vice President, Jeff Roberts. So Jeff from Colorado. Thank you, Jeff, for stepping into that role. By the way, I plan my presidential term, this term ends next year. They're 2-year terms. I plan to step down after that. So I'll put in another year. I think I feel great with how we have landed softly and have not crashed and burned. It took a lot of work of the board and Megan and others to do that, but I feel good about that. And so I think I can ride off into the sunset in the Sonoran Desert here in Tucson and let new ideas, fresh ideas jump in and go from there. Particularly, I think it's important that coalition leaders serve as leadership for NFOIC. I'm just a professor at a university, right? I work hard for you all, but I think having a board that's made up of active coalition leaders, own it. It's yours, and I think that's important. But I've really enjoyed and been honored to be able to help as I can. So that's kind of our board situation. Summit updates. So the board decided to do this virtually this year for a variety of reasons. We had a meeting in, I forget when, about that in the spring, and it's worked out well. I'll open the room to comments and talking about the summit, particularly for next year. So next year, we have a contract with the Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, to be in person. Now, we've had this for several years before the pandemic. We've extended the contract. You know, hotels allowed people to do that because of the pandemic. And so here we have this hotel contract. So we can have an in-person gathering next year. Now, there's costs associated with that for people to travel there and for the organization. We're examining those costs now, and we'd have to try to get sponsorship. We could do virtual again next year, where we would save a lot of money and more people could be involved. I think at this virtual summit last year, we had about 300 people registered, more than that. Typical in-person summits would have maybe 75, maybe 100 at the most attending in person. And a lot of those would be speakers. So there are pros and cons of both, right? Some people say hybrid. Now we've been hearing hybrid. I just heard 258 now registered for this year, and we expect more to register who will want the recordings. So that's great. So pros and cons of both, but we want to hear from you all what you would like for next year for the summit. As we talk about this more, probably at a December meeting to try to figure this out. So I open the floor. If you want to make a comment about the summit and your preferences or anything else, just put an X in the chat or write your question in the chat, the Zoom chat, and let's talk about it. Well, any comments on this year's summit? What do you think? Things we could improve on, things that went well, things that could be better? My chat must be broken because I see nothing in there. And I know this is a group that is very talkative and has opinions, and they are rabble-rousers. Robert, are you going to say something? McClure?
Well, I just, I think you should seriously consider a hybrid conference. I'm still not flying, and I know a lot of people still aren't flying. I've only been to last year's and this year's. They've both been excellent, by the way. This virtual has worked really well for me, but I definitely recognize the value of doing one in person as well. So I think you should seriously consider a hybrid conference, and obviously you still want to get sponsors. So.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about hybrid. The two issues with hybrid that I've heard from other folks who have had conferences, one, it's often not a very good experience for those people at home. They can't hear people talking behind the mics, questions being asked, other things. Now, maybe that can be overcome. But the other thing is we have to have a certain number of rooms booked in person, or we're charged a lot of money. And so if people decide, oh, I'll just stay home, and 3 people show up in person or whatever, then that becomes, we spend a lot of money for very few people. And so those are the two things we have to consider when we consider hybrid. On its face, hybrid seems to make sense, right? But we're going to figure that more about that over the next month or two, because that might be the best way to go. I'm seeing comments in the chat. Thank you. Variety. Rick there from University of Massachusetts, Rick Pelt-Steele, says having it online has been really helpful. His students attend. I make my students attend too. But yeah, so it's helpful for bringing in new voices anyway, and new observers.
I think it's really important to think about what the projections are at this point for health concerns for the next year. And I I've done a little bit of this in my life, and I understand. And I think it's just too risky at this point to be talking even about hybrid, because the point that you make about having to make a certain commitment to the hotel is a very important one. And just think about it. You're going to meet in December to talk about this for 10 months ahead, and look at our experience in the last 2.5 to 3 years about trying to think 10 months ahead. I would really recommend thinking about another virtual conference. These two have worked reasonably well. And I think that it would be, when you're talking about the kind of budget that you're talking about, it's a very, in my estimation, a serious risk. And so I don't think that we have enough information, and I don't think we're going to have enough information by December or whenever commitments would have to be made. So I would suggest another year with the virtual and see where we are.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. And yeah, you make a good point. I attended a gathering similar size to NFOIC in New Haven, Connecticut last weekend. And several people have reported getting COVID since the gathering. And so it's still going around. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. It was a good gathering. There's something about being in person. It's hard to mimic. These are the trade-offs, and we're going to have to figure that out. That's for sure. One option I'm going to toss out. What about every other year in person, or every 3 years in person? Especially, it gives us time to save up money for a great in-person shindig. And then it still allows coalition leaders to really get to know each other. And perhaps we could provide travel stipends to help for those leaders. But then, every other year, or 2 years in a row, we go virtual. So to save money, and I don't know, I'm just tossing out ideas, brainstorming here. Thoughts?
I like that idea. I think the main advantage to being in person is to get to know everybody a little bit better. The advantage to doing what we're doing now is bringing in a broader range of people. I was particularly impressed with the panel on disappearing messaging apps the other day. And, you think about, you had state lawmaker from Michigan, you had people from Maryland, somebody from Missouri. Without doing it this way, I don't know if we could have replicated that in person. And it was really a good conversation and well done. So that's definitely the advantage of this, and just also makes it so easy to attend it. So I like that. I also miss and like the idea of spending time in person with other coalition directors, because you never know what will come up when you start talking.
Right.
Well, I have a question of Megan. What's a huckle up? Is that a Virginia term? What the heck? But it sounds like definitely I'd want to do a huckle up.
I was just thinking of, maybe something less formal, that we do gather in person for a weekend at our own out of pocket. I don't know. That's what a huckle up is.
Whatever we do, we have to call it a huckle up officially.
I'm looking it up. It's funny, Megan, that you said that, because I've been someone that has really wanted to go back to the in-person, just because I enjoyed, when I first became a coalition leader, it was very helpful to me to meet Jeff and you. I remember in the beginning, and Michael Morrissey, And however, the virtual conferences have been very efficient, especially in terms of getting good speakers, I think, and the programming and being able to offer that programming to a wider group of people, maybe even help sort of the brand of NFOIC too, and maybe the mission. And so, yeah, maybe we separate the summit, continue that, or whatever this is, conference online, and have something that's very less casual, not built around a speaker environment or kind of traditional conferencing for a I mean, really what maybe used to be a summit, right? I mean, this is more like conference and but something a little bit more casual and like you said, perhaps on our own dime, but not where we have to rent a hotel, get a conference room, but something a little bit doable and affordable, but allow us a chance to get to know each other. And I mean, there might be some kind of topic, but anyway, I like that idea. I've been that's been percolating in my mind as well. I'm glad it now has a name. Buckle up.
That's a pretty good idea in a way. I mean, what's to say we couldn't have just a gathering of coalition leaders? I mean, we have 40 technical coalitions. My guess is actual active people who might come might be 30 at the most. Those 30 people could all come into some kind of cool location, kind of like the real small organizations I've seen, like JAWS and others. They'll have really intimate gatherings in Whitefish, Montana, or wherever, and it's a great experience. And then 6 months later, the other half of the year, we have a big virtual FOIA fest for everybody to participate, that like this that we're doing now. Those are great ideas, folks. Huckle up and FOIA fest, separate entity, separate things. Any other thoughts on the summit? And any other topics you want to bring up or talk about? Floor is yours. I'll pose a question then. Megan, and before that, Todd and probably before that, are running monthly webinars or monthly gatherings, Zoom gatherings, right? Where coalitions can jump on and talk about certain topics. Are those useful, or are there things we could do to make those more inviting? Usually we don't probably get, I don't know, Megan, maybe a half dozen people showing up ish. Thoughts, are those useful or something else better?
6 to 10, but not always the same 6 to 10.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not bad. What would you be interested in, everybody?
Are those just for the presidents or the board members of the coalitions? Because this is the first I'm hearing about those monthly meetings. Maybe they go to our president and he doesn't forward them along. I'm not sure.
Did you see they took the lockdown down? Yeah. Such a shit thing to happen.
I'm sorry.
Michelle, there is a member listserv. And that's where I put the announcements for these, and they're open to anyone. Can you drop your email address in the chat and I will add you to the member listserv?
Well, Michelle was at the last one.
The conference. No, I wasn't at a monthly meeting.
No.
I thought she was. Oh, okay.
No, I've not. I've only been to the conferences. So
Yeah.
Oh.
So can you do that? Can you drop in your email and then I'll add you to that group? Yeah, because I can't, I know Paul is definitely on that group. So.
Yeah, and Megan, what's your feeling? I mean, I think anybody wants to show up from the coalition's board member leader could, right? I mean, that's the end. There's nothing, it's just the president or whoever. Okay.
Yeah, again, I've recently been voluntold, the PR person now, so I'm trying to help Paul with a lot of that, so.
Yeah, anything else? A quiet group. I'm not sure, not sure why people are silent, but maybe that's a good thing.
What about topics? Would you guys like to drop in the chat, maybe some ideas for next year? Some speakers you may feel like you would love to have as a keynote or anything for next year as well. You can also email them to me, David or Megan later too, if you want to think about those.
Sorry, Erica, were you asking for speakers for the monthly sort of check-ins or for the summit next year?
Sorry, apologies. I was actually asking if you guys want to drop in some topic ideas for next year's conference, more for like if we're gonna do a FOIA feast, or if you guys have any ideas for us, feel free to send them our way or put them in the chat for us. Or we can talk about it now. Patrick, if you have like some ideas, feel free to
Nope,
share.
I just wanted to get clarity before I started throwing stuff into the chat. Thank you.
All right. Well, there's no reason why we have to stay another 15 minutes or whatever, just to stay, so we could adjourn this meeting if you'd like to adjourn.
Let me get clarification from Robert. Vexatious requesters legislation, is that a summit topic or a monthly
Could be either.
get-together topic?
I'm just aware that there's this in certain states, and this has come up here, that there's legislation. I think there must be some kind of group behind this. I'm not sure if it's ALEC or who it is that's having that there's model legislation being sent around apparently. This term has come up in the state of Washington, and I've heard that it's coming up in other states, but I don't know much about it. The Washington Coalition for Open Government has undertaken a campaign called Protecting the Public Records Act, because we anticipate this kind of attack to come. It comes up every year or two, but this new vexatious requesters is terminology I had not heard until the last 6 months or so. So I don't know. I'm very new, I'm a new board member, only been here about 1.5 years, and I'm sure there's people in this meeting right now who know a lot more about that than I do.
Yeah, we've been hearing about that popping up, I think in response to a lot of records request activity in county election offices around the country, harassment, and in response, there's this legislation's trying to get this going. There's some of that already out there, but I think I predict we're going to see a bunch of this come January, February. So we're definitely probably going to have to push back, because it's a really hard thing to define, right? And it can be abused. I could tell you, every government official I worked with as a journalist probably thought I was vexatious and unduly burdensome. So yeah, I think you're right, Robert. It's going to be a thing.
It's a very difficult line to draw. We've been finding that as we look forward, and I do think that, yeah, the folks who are going around and asking for all those election records, apparently not asking for the right ones, is going to that'll add additional fuel to the fire. And it is a very difficult question.
And it's a difficult question in Maine anyway, because there's a lot of concern about commercial entities requesting entire databases, which they then go on to commercialize in one way or another. And this is something that according to state agencies, takes up a lot of time and much more than the compensation pays for, in addition to which those kind of wholesale releases of databases have a lot of difficulties involved in them. Redaction is a huge problem in those kind of situations. And so separating what's vexatious from the point of view of, for example, trying to flood election officers and county clerks with requests for information that isn't really useful to what they're asking for when they actually get it. And separating that from things that aren't vexatious in the sense of trying to slow anything down, but from the point of view of a lot of people in legislatures are saying, wait a minute, we have, the people of this state have paid for all of this information, and to have it commercialized with no benefit coming back to the people of the state is something that a good number of legislators are very concerned about. And that's going on all over the country. So every time, we go to one of these white pages or whatever it might be, and, looking for a phone number or something and find out that just for 1995, we can have all that and more, is that gets the attention of legislators.
Thank you, Jim. Robert, you had a comment, and then Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this session, this summit proved very helpful to me in that regard, very hands-on way. In a members only session where we were discussing this, I learned that at Tennessee, I believe it was Tennessee, I'd have to go check my notes. They came up with a system that said basically that if an agency feels that someone is overly burdensome, that they can go to court and get an injunction, but the standard is that they have to be shown to have intent to disrupt government operations, I believe was the standard, something along to that effect. And here in Washington, we've had some pretty some cases that are adding fuel to the other side of the argument. Just going back a few years, there was a small town called Gold Bar that actually had to unincorporate because of Public Records Act penalties that were assessed against it. It's this, tiny little town, didn't know what they were doing, got into a situation where they were running up a whole bunch of bills and against arguably, I would not call that person vexatious, just committed. And that person was not trying to get rid of the town of Gold Bar, but that was the result. And so there are examples like that where if we had some kind of pressure relief valve with a really high standard, that it allows an agency to get an injunction against the requester for 1 year. So that was a real practical thing that when we start talking to legislators in January, if this comes up, that's a good thing to have in my back pocket, that, hey, look at what Tennessee did. So I thought that was super helpful.
Thank you, Robert. Michael, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. One of the things that really shocked me, we kind of discussed similar issues at the FOIA Advisory Committee at the federal level at the last session, and talking with agencies, even at the federal level, which have a lot more resources than your typical town clerk, seeing how little sort of information sharing and kind of like best practice sharing there was in terms of dealing with this. And I think it's an area that coalitions and then also potentially NFOIC, can help share those best practices. Because what I found is that agencies that get a ton of requests, have a fairly standard way of dealing with vexatious requesters. Go to the back of the line, we're going to assess the fees that we can and kind of treat it as due course versus agencies that haven't seen that kind of freak out and then tend to overreact. And I think it's being sympathetic and kind of saying, hey, here's our best practices, or kind of as a requester community sharing what we think is appropriate and inappropriate would go a long way. Because I've also seen in Illinois where they put in a vexatious requester law that banned a lot of reporters who are just filing sort of regular standard requests instantly got weaponized against very common usages.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, you're spot on. And by the way, I saw in the chat, Rick mentioned he has a student working on us. I take it a state-by-state look at this issue. I think if, Rick, you can make that student turn that in early, maybe extra credit if she gets or he gets it in by December or November, and then submit it to the Breckner Center Breckner Center for Freedom of Information Journal of Civic Information. I just put the link in the chat, and we'll get that out immediately so everybody can use that knowledge. It's really valuable when we have a state-by-state comparison on these issues and how it's working and how it isn't. So thank you. And you're right, Michael. I think the Federal FOIA Advisory Committee is going to be working on this probably again this next term. And so I'll try to keep people in the loop on what we find out, because there are some countries tackling this as well. So Rick is saying not a survey, but we'll get something. Definitely a need. I would love if we can get in this country research and development, an R&D for FOI office that could turn around quickly within a couple weeks or a month, a national, comparison of certain issues. These things come up all the time on the listserv, right? People have a question. How is it in your state on this topic? And we chime in, and doesn't chime in. That's great. But what if we had something that we could turn around, something that's complete and relatively accurate that could be useful in what we do?
I'll take this moment to thank everyone who responded to my request for your laws on agendas before meetings on that listserv. That was very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Oh, by the way, we do have Alina Simo in here, Director of OGIS. And Alina, you're free to chime in on this issue since it may come up at the federal level, and you've looked at this internationally, I believe. As well as emails. That's perfectly fine. All right.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry, I was just trying to find the unmute button. I definitely am very interested to see that paper that student is working on. Absolutely extra credit. I think the FOIA Advisory Committee would be very interested in that. And it is an issue that continues to interest a number of the committee members this term, so we definitely want to examine it. Thanks.
And by the way, that link I put in the chat to the journal, it actually goes to our latest publication produced by a student from Rick. So Rick is having his students do great things on secrecy in prison labor pool records around the country. Megan.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, this is just logistically speaking. There is a monthly roundtable scheduled for next week that I have to cancel. And then if we were to, keep the schedule of the last Friday of the month, that would be the day after Thanksgiving. So I don't think that's going to work. So I'll send a notice out there, but I'm going to remove the November meeting to November 18th to try to accommodate Thanksgiving. But and Jeff, I'll be out your way next week.
All right. Well, any last comments or questions before we adjourn our member meeting? Sorry, I'm reading this one post here in the chat. Skimming it. Okay. All right. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for attending. Thank you for attending the conference and doing what you do. I mean, it's so important. If you weren't here, active in your state, making government better, it would completely fall apart. I mean, it's already democracy's fraying. So without your help, we'd really be in a bad spot. So know what you do is important. And thank you. And we'll go on to the next session then of the summit. So everybody take care.